One of the things that I love is that two films idea of your life. And there's like two stories you can tell. One that is safe and full of regret, and one that is risky and full of pride and joy.
Good morning. It's slightly surreal. I went to school in England, but the coach of our football team was Welsh, and before every match we played, he taught us one song, which is the song we've just done, to get our adrenaline going. And so it was just slightly surreal. So when the thing was passed, I suddenly thought I may look quite enthusiastic on that film, to sort of get myself psyched up, because I was pretty sure on the words. But before we talk about addresses and place, I thought I'd talk about suitcases. And it might seem like a bizarre way in, but whenever anyone says, what are you doing? What's this similar to what you're doing? I can never kind of think of a good analogy in the world of maps and navigation, so I come back to suitcases. And I'll just tell you why. So there's a guy called Ron Arad who is credited as designing the iPad in terms of the actual design of it first. And I read this, what he said about suitcases a while into what we were doing, and he said that we had suitcases and we had wheels, but it took a long time for someone to put them together, which is true. And it doesn't seem like the most advanced invention, but it was 1970 when a guy called Bernard Sadow saw people in an airport with suitcases and saw some other people with some kind of wheeled device and thought, how about you put the suitcase with the wheels? This could be something that consumers could really dig and get into. So he put together a prototype of a suitcase on wheels, because before that no one ever had wheels, and he took them to department stores around New York to see if anyone would be interested. And he had the same feedback for 6 months, which was that people said, this is ridiculous. He wheeled it across the floor. He said, look, luggage is much easier to take like this. And people said, it's ridiculous. No one's ever going to buy one of these, especially no man will ever buy one of these, because it would be so ridiculous. It would look like he was unable to carry his suitcase. And we won't stock this. And it took him 6 months before he got a single department store to try it. And they marketed it as the luggage that glides. And it took him a long time to get anyone, once it was in the stores, to use it, until they managed to get an airline, the air hostesses, to actually use the suitcases on wheels. And people saw the air hostesses, who needed it more than anyone because they traveled so much. And over time, he got people to buy suitcases on wheels. Sorry, this is relevant. Because I think what we're trying to do is change people's behavior in something which they're not used to changing behavior about. And I think that's how I'm viewing what we're doing on a daily basis. Whilst we'll obviously have to do loads of other things in the business, what we're actually trying to do is get people to think a little bit differently about something which they haven't done before. So I'll come back to the wheel suitcase. So I was working in the music business, and you may think of the problems of the music business, streaming and all these sort of associated things, but this sign was actually my biggest problem, or any variant on this sign, because I was in live music, and everywhere that we did a gig, I was organising, booking bands, and we give everyone the address and the postcode, and we say, okay, you've got to turn up at 5 o'clock, the gig's at 7, don't be late. And actually one of the big parts of running a band and production efficiently is that you have to be aware that at 5 o'clock everyone will call you and say, I've put the address into my sat-nav and I'm by a lamppost and a hedge, and I can't see anything which looks like the gig. And this is because addresses actually don't work particularly well, or postcodes. So, and I was kind of reminded of this coming up here a couple of nights ago. It was kind of past midnight, and we put the postcode in, the very kind girl who took us, and then we sort of crawled along this long Welsh road looking for the hotel because that's what we do. And I think someone who'd come here said, oh my God, yeah, I put the postcode and I was halfway up the hill and it's somewhere else. But when you're doing this every day and you've got guitarists who are not compatible with sat-navs and addresses, and they feel like they've fulfilled their job if they've gone to where the sat-nav says, it's a really significant issue. And that's just in this country, and it caused a lot of problems. And in 2010, there's a place called the Birmingham Hilton Metropole Hotel. I suggest you don't go there. It's a very sterile place. But they have several different event rooms, and I had a call at 6 o'clock on one I wasn't at myself, and the band said, look, don't panic massively, but we may have just set up and sound-checked at the wrong people's gig. But please don't worry, because the band for this one is actually sound-checked at ours. We've all spoken to both sets of clients, and everyone's decided the best thing is just for everyone to play the wrong gig. So it's more of an informative message. But this is kind of odd. This is a significant issue. And the more you look at addresses around the world, like we went abroad and we went to places like Nigeria and all sorts of places, and you realise that when you go to places and they don't even have an address at all, and they just give you landmarks, this is kind of an issue. And there's actually 75% of countries in the world have what the UN call like an inadequate address system. It's just simply kind of not good enough. And they also say that there's 4 billion people across the whole world who live without an address, which seems like a staggering number when we think about what we have here. But we kind of actually have the good system, Birmingham and that incident aside. And what's interesting is seeing how people try to make address systems when they don't exist. This is a side of a house in Ghana where over the last 15 years, the government's tried to put in several addressing systems, and they kind of paint the size of the houses with them, and then they do it for a few months, and they do a part of a town, and then something goes wrong, and then they try another system, and then they paint the same house again, and this poor guy's got 6 different address systems painted on his house, and actually none of them still work, and the government basically just gave up and said, we don't have addresses, we're not going to do anything about it. So it's a difficult global problem. I'm sure slowly they are trying to do things, but it's not straightforward, it's costly, and it takes a lot of time to sort out. So back to my experience of this in music and how I tried to solve it. I was going to be the kind of geek music band mover, organizer, and I thought that this might be the solution. So there's GPS coordinates, and I kind of, we learn at school that the equator is 0, Tropic of Cancer 23, but actually if you click on to your mapping app to a very specific point, a lot of things like Google Maps will give you a latitude and longitude, and you can actually zoom in, find the exact place you want to talk about, and you'll get something that looks like this. And so I thought, okay, we had this big event in Italy, an hour south of Rome, so I said to everyone, forget the address, doesn't exist. I'm going to give you the GPS coordinates. You can put these into your TomTom and your sat-navs and your mapping apps, and it will get you there. And basically, it was utter carnage, because people were calling up going, dude, where's the degree sign on my phone? And actually, the musicians and the guitarist were actually the best. And the problem was the truck driver who had all of the equipment, who was actually like, no, I'm totally good with coordinates. I do this all the time. But what I hadn't realized is he then mixed up a 4 and a 5 and deposited all of the gear 1 hour north of Rome or 1 hour south of Rome, but on the perfect longitude. It would be funny if it wasn't so true and such a big event that went so very nearly badly wrong. It kind of it dawned on me that there was something that could be done about this. So I had this kind of annual cup of tea with a friend of mine who's a professional mathematician, which is a good person to think about solutions with to stuff like this. And I was like, why can't we just make something way easier than this for people to work with, so that actually you don't have to worry about where the degree sign is on your phone, or mix it up a 4 and a 5 and something which is a lot more straightforward? Can we kind of make a code for the world, which is for idiots, guitarists, everyone, so that everyone can actually use this? And we played around with some ideas, and where we got to is that instead of having 16 numbers, there'd been a couple of people who'd thought the same thing, by the way, including TomTom and Google, who'd come out with these shorter codes of 9 alphanumeric characters, saying that, look, 16 numbers is a bit of a hassle, let's just use these 9 alphanumeric characters, but we figured that was still pretty tough. It's like trying to communicate with Wi-Fi passcodes. You know, I'll meet you at JZ3NQ.4LPNBW is, we thought, too awkward still. Can we get the code much shorter? So we played around with some numbers and found that if you take 40,000 words from the English dictionary and you grid the world into 3-meter squares, so 57 trillion 3-meter squares across the world, you only need a combination of 3 words from the dictionary, and you can uniquely label every 3-meter square in the world with 3 words, if that makes sense. So bear with me. So imagine that this 3-meter square here, by this door, is table, chair, spoon. And then you label the next square toffee, branch, pyramid. And you label the square after that basket, crayon, wall, and on you go. There are enough combinations that you can go around the whole world and do this. So to me, I thought, well, hey, that works. I could give someone 3 words. They can't mess it up, and this could really be something. So, to cut the next few months short, we set out to put this into action. We wrote an algorithm which basically did exactly that and assigned them all across the world. And it's in an app which we call What 3 Words, and it lets you navigate and do everything you could do with a normal mapping app, but it's got the 3 words superimposed at the bottom. And we did this in several languages. So the whole world is in English 3 words. The whole world is then in French 3 words. It's in Spanish 3 words, Swahili, and a number of other languages. So this is not an English-only thing. And it just means that wherever you go, you should be able to use 3 words in your own language. So if we all went to Russia and went to an event, we could meet at basket, lighting, amplification. And if Russians came to London, they don't have to worry about how to spell Blenheim, Crescent, and Worcester, Terrace. They could use 3 Russian words, which would work for them. So I guess back to behavior change. It's kind of an abstract concept. And you know, if you suddenly tell everyone that table, chair, spoon is an address, or they might live at Foxtrot, cabbage, table, you're telling someone that cabbage is now their address. And you know, whilst I've had the benefit of explaining the logic behind it, that's a really hard thing to sometimes get people to think, okay, is this good, is this bad, how do I feel about this? So whilst we thought it was good because we knew the background, I'll just sort of talk you through a few of the ways it's perceived, because it's kind of interesting when you come out with something as different as this. So this guy on Twitter exemplifies what a few people think. What 3 words is an interesting way of replacing geolocation, latitude, and longitude with strange combination of 3 words. Bizarre, absolutely bizarre, which is how a lot of people will first interpret it. And when we went to get in the tech press when we started, we went for Wired, and they came out with, they did this kind of abstract picture of me sellotaping orange tape all over the world in 3-meter squares. And they said, look, we're going to call you the crazy global mapper. And I said, is there any way we could kind of call it, I don't know, ambitious global mapper or audacious global mapper? And they were like, no, I think crazy is kind of really where we want to position this. And I kind of left it with them, hoping that, but no. But you know, it's interesting to see how tech people perceive this and what you're doing. But fortunately, we got some better feedback, which was what we were really aiming for. So Rory Sutherland, who's vice chairman of Ogilvy, writes a piece in The Spectator and really loved the idea. Best navigation idea he'd seen since the tube map, which is exactly what we wanted to sort of captivate people with. Actually, this is a really cool idea. And then about the actual utility this could have, the World Economic Forum said, you know, there's a whole load, you know, they were captivated by that 4 billion people who don't have an address, and they said, could you write a piece which says, to help end poverty, give everyone an address? It's a provocative statement, but it's much more serious and kind of how we were thinking we could affect the lives of a lot of people. And if you have this week's Economist, there's a piece on us in here which is talking about much sort of, similar global development issues. And it's a really nice piece, and if anyone happens to fall over a copy, it's well worth a read. But this is kind of where we wanted to end up. But it's just really interesting how different people perceive what you're doing in different way, because an address to some people is something very straightforward, and if you change it, that's kind of weird. But if you don't have an address, it means something totally different. So we do have an app. It's called What 3 Words, and if you download it at some point when you get a phone signal, you can find the 3 words that we've labelled your front door with, which we have because all of the 3 metre squares in the world we've already labelled. And it's the first thing a lot of people do, including the Do lectures, who put on Twitter this week directions to the Do farm: hubcaps eating, quaking. And this is a good example because that will bring you right to the entrance here, and it won't take you to where the postcode takes you, which is kind of up the road. And there was some interesting feedback from a guy called Phil Adams. Don't know if he's here or not, but he brought out a really important point about the system, which is worth making clear. That if you get it slightly wrong, and he's taken a screenshot from our website here, where it's got some similar named places. So yeah, hubcaps eating, quaking is near Cardigan in Wales. But if you get hubcap, not hubcaps, eating, quaking, well, we've named that in somewhere in Sinai in Egypt. And if it's hubcaps eats, quaking, then that's somewhere in Alaska. And at first glance, that can seem like a bug in the system, that, if you get it slightly wrong, God, that's so far away. But for us, this is a feature, not a bug, because thinking about my truck driver in Rome, I thought the worst possible thing that could happen would be if someone got one of our words slightly wrong, but they ended up aimlessly in Wales. That would be kind of a problem. But it's really doubtful anyone would set off for the Do lectures if it said Sinai and they said, well, I'll just book a flight. And off I go. We figured that was far better. So I'm not sure what Phil thought, but as soon as our marketing guy jumped in, Phil decided this was a good idea. So that is deliberate, and once he realised deliberate, it's very smart and very cool. But it's one of those things that it needs a bit of thinking about before you realise, actually, I think the system is better for working that way. So how do we make any money with this idea? So what we do is we have a free app and free website that consumers can use. And how we make money is we license to businesses, so people who can benefit from using this. So Glastonbury Festival this year, there's a company called Festival Medical Services, and they got 200,000 people in a field with one postcode to try and deal with. And what they do is they commissioned us to do a customized version of our site with the Glastonbury imagery, which you can see here. And so what they have is they have people in the field who are on radio saying, someone's just fainted at Candle Eclipse Banana, can you get someone here straight away? And goes back to the head office, they'll coordinate it, and someone goes out there, and as ridiculous as that may sound, it helps them so much more than kind of going near the stage where there's 2,000 people to sift through. And that's a really, really massive help for them that they do that. We have a stack of apps who've built us in. So there's a whole load of apps where people blame the app. They're like, I've put in this address, I didn't get there, NavMe, you're the worst app ever. And NavMe's going, hey, I just licensed the data off someone else. But people blame their apps. So there's a lot of apps who want to make a better experience for their consumers who think that What 3 Words is a good way of doing that. So there's probably now 100 different types of navigation app who've built us in. And the one I wanted to just show as an example is this one by the UN, who actually collect data in international crises. And of course, a lot of the time it's in countries with bad addresses or no addresses. And each bit of data which goes back to Geneva, they now tag. So this one, toast, frame, grape. And that massively helps them know exactly where things were happening. Now in March, this is where things kind of got really exciting for us, because I went out to Mongolia, and you've got a big old country there, 3 times the size of France. There's a guy I met at the World Economic Forum who was like, we have no proper address system here, and stuff is really awkward. So this is what a house looks like, but if you put it in the context of the countryside, you can see how delivering here, if you're the post service, is kind of problematic. Because it literally defines the middle of nowhere. So I said to the Post Service, what are your problems? And they said, well, yes, trying to deliver to our population's a problem, and also ASOS. I was like, ASOS in the UK? And they're like, yeah, ASOS in the UK. Mongolians love ASOS, which is not what I was expecting them to say. But it's true. People go on and they type onto the ASOS checkout page, I live at the 4th lamppost on the right, past the roundabout. And Mongol Post get this, and they're like, which roundabout? It's really tough. So we've actually now done a deal with them and made a Mongolian version of What 3 Words, the whole world in 3 Mongolian words. Mongolian is a Cyrillic language, and they've got extra characters on their own. It's kind of tough to deal with. And we've just signed a deal with them last month, and the idea is that this gets rolled out in a couple of months' time to the whole country, because this can really make a big impact for them. They can deliver to everybody in the country straight away, because there's a 3-word address for everywhere. And they can optimize what they're doing in the capital, where they were working and they are working, but things could be better. But for us, that's a huge deal to go and have our tech used by a country to enable something as important as that. So just to finish up with a couple of last use cases of where we see this going, there's an amazing stat from UPS where they say that if each of their drivers in the world drove 1 mile less a day because they got a little bit less lost, they would save $50 million a year, which is a big price tag for guys getting lost. And this is a company who, the doors come back on UPS vans, and the drivers drive without the doors on because it takes 1 second to get out, 1 second to get in. That's what you're talking about, increasing efficiency at scale. That's the kind of thing they want to do. So we've just done a deal with a company called Aramex, who are like the UPS or FedEx of the Middle East, who've invested in our company, and we're rolling this out across the whole region. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Dubai, but if you meet someone in a bank, they give you a business card, it'll look very kind of a CEO of important bank, opposite Dunkin' Donuts. This is a country where a lot of things are very, very advanced, but addresses are tricky. And so Aramex are rolling us out across that region. And then from going into the sort of creative world, we won something called the Grand Prix for Innovation at Cannes Lions Festival, and a black pencil, something called D&AD, for anyone who's in the creative world. And we're now working with brands. So I guess back to my parallel of rolling suitcases, when the airline hostess took the wheeled suitcase and said, hey, this is okay, it's got wheels, we do the same with Audi. So Audi used our German version. They found that Vorsprung durch Technik was a 3-word address in the middle of Brazil, which it is, and they decided to drive a car there and kind of brought the whole thing to life with 3-word addresses. And because Audi say, hey, this is cool, a lot of people go, well, Audi says it's cool, so therefore table, chair, spoon is less weird. This is actually really cool and helpful and can get me literally anywhere. So what we're trying to do is, What 3 Words is something very simple. We want to make the world a more efficient, less frustrating, and safer place, because that's all the ways that addresses can impact people's lives. And I just want to leave you with one thought from a guy you may not have heard of, but he's probably done the most significant thing in mapping in the last 10 years, which is to create something called OpenStreetMap, which is a user community map of the world that people have actually uploaded themselves. And what he kind of says about us is about how we feel, how I personally feel about a rolling suitcase. And that he says, for some reason we consider it normal in such a modern time and place that 2 people can't locate each other occasionally. That is actually nuts when you think about it. It's 2016. Really, this should not be a problem. It costs us a lot of time and energy. It's 2016. By contrast, imagine you were born in a world where What 3 Words just existed and everyone used it. You would think your grandparents were pretty dumb to not be able to find each other at a concert, or not be able to tell the emergency responder where you were in a big field or a big road, or that delivery drivers actually wandered around trying to find the right door. And yet, and this is a good point, somehow we could put somebody on the moon, but in Wales, you have to say it's that postcode, and then it's on the left by the hedge and reverse a bit, and it's in the left. Because that's the world we live in, and maybe by building a common language of location for humans, we can make it a problem our grandchildren can just laugh at. And I'd love to just leave you with that to kind of think, actually, if we all grew up saying table, chair, spoon, would we all just do that and not think twice about it? So anyway, that's us. We're trying to change the world through a pretty significant behaviour change, but I hope it's been interesting to think about. Thank you.